Hey, everybody, welcome to Behind the Headlines. I apologize for my being held hostage background I have going here today. But thanks for joining us. I have another amazing guest for you. Apparently, it has been the past couple of weeks has been Green Party president and vice presidential candidate week. Last week, I spoke to Ajamu Baraka, and today I speak to the former presidential candidate, David Cobb. I'm sure many of you remember him from that presidential run. But nowadays, he's doing something different, yet also equally important. He is the advancement manager for the Wiyot Tribe Community Land Trust. He's also the co-coordinator of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. And he is one of the promoters of the Decolonizing Economics Summit, which we will be getting into extensively. And please put your comments in the thread there in the chat. I will be highlighting, and the moderator will be highlighting as many as we can. Even if we don't address them, we'll try and throw them up on the screen. Please click subscribe and share and all those good things. And let's get started. Please welcome David Cobb.
Hello, howdy, Lee Camp. It's good to see you again. I mean, I see you one-sided, and I'm really excited that you landed with Mint Press and Behind the Headlines. But this is the first substantive conversation as organizers and revolutionaries that we've had in a minute. So it's good to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time I talk with you, I leave more informed and more excited for the work to be done. So that's why I wanted to chat with you again.
Well, thank you. And I want to say, I'm proud. I am still a registered Green. I still am active with the Green Party. But I really am in a different spot now, Lee, because what I really want to underscore is I still believe that there is a role for electoral politics, but I am not an electoral fetishist, right?
That was one of the things I wanted to ask you. We can get to it now rather than saving it for later. Is your view on electoral politics? Because my view, and I've had this for a while, and I always tell people, yes, vote. It's important to vote because the ruling elite would love nothing more than for you to stay home. In certain state and local issues, it can be important, very important, and you can have a big significant change. But in general, in the federal government, this thing is bought and sold. And you should spend about 5% of your time talking about electoralism.
Well, listen, I love that because I'm going to take one step back and say, you know me, Lee, and I hope that if maybe some of your audience knows as well, I self-identify as a revolutionary. And I do that for two very important reasons. Number one, because it's true, right? I do not believe that we can reform our way into liberation. This current system, the social, political, and economic system of the entire premise of this settler colonial state and experiment is fundamentally racist. It's fundamentally sexist. It's fundamentally class oppressive. And as if that's not bad enough, and I think we can agree that's pretty fucking terrible, right? It's a terrible thing, but we have to come to terms with the fact that these transnational corporations globally and the empire for which the U.S. is the capital of corporate empire, Lee, they're literally going to destroy the planet if we do not stop, interrupt, and transition. And to be clear, the window to do that is literally closing before our very eyes, right? So I make no bones, I'm a revolutionary, and I say that because I believe we have to restructure our social, political, and economic institutions. The second reason I say it is because I'm trying to normalize that conversation. I'm trying to get people who know in their heart, in their body, in their head that we need to restructure society. Let's talk about it. Let's say it out loud. In this society, we are constantly told to censor ourselves. You know that as well as anybody, Lee Camp, that we're told, oh, you can't say that, or that's too much, or that's too whatever. What I'm saying is we need a revolutionary ethos. Now, what that means, we can talk about, right? But we need to talk about the need to engage in the revolutionary process, because revolution is not just an event. It is literally a process. I believe in class struggle. I believe in consciousness. And that's why, and I'm going to land the plane, electoral politics is an important part of that conversation, because if you and I go out into the pool halls or the bowling alleys, which I know I do, I reckon you do too, and I have these kind of conversations. If I say I want to talk about politics, 95% of the people I say that to assume I want to talk about elections. So that's where people are. So we have to start there, but we can't end there, because let's be honest. The leadership of the Democratic Party and Republican Party are in absolute agreement about the U.S. empire. They're in absolute agreement about capitalism. They're in absolute agreement about the big picture. There's plenty of things that they will disagree about, right? Abortion, transgender rights. I'm not saying that those are not important. I'm saying those disagreements, while they exist, also exist in a broad agreement and a consensus on U.S. imperialism, on capitalism, and white supremacy.
Beautifully said. And yeah, I think we do need revolutionary change. And as you said, the window of possible time to do that is closing. And to me, that kind of the combination of climate crisis and environmental crisis of all types. It's not just the climate. We're filling the world with plastic as well. A million bottles of water used around the world every minute, I believe, or something like that. We're killing the world in the planet in so many ways that this would be a different conversation 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Now it's like this all needs to happen within a decade or something. So you can't, the whole like, well, normally, yes, but Trump is very dangerous. So let's put all of our time and effort behind getting Biden in office. Like that kind of talk doesn't work now. Like,
I mean, it's such bullshit, Lee. Let's just be honest, right? Like, again, I'm not going to fuss at people, right? Like, one thing that I've found, if I'm going to have principled disagreement, like principled struggle with folks, if folks enter into a conversation where they already have a deeply held principled conviction that Trump is so dangerous or the fascists are so dangerous that I'm going to hold my nose and pull a lever for Biden or some neoliberal Democrat, then I'm going to say, all right, we have a disagreement. I'm not going to do that. But can we talk about building worker-owned cooperatives? Can we talk about public banking and participatory budgeting? Where do we have agreement, right? Because if somebody is like, I'm really thinking about who to vote for, then I'll have that conversation, right? But if somebody is like, I'm already going to vote for Biden because Trump is so dangerous, then I'm like, all right, you've made up your mind. I disagree, but I don't want to just yell at you. I don't want to turn a comrade into an enemy over at something, honestly, as mundane as one single vote.
So someone brought it up in the chat. So you excited about what's going on in France right now? Speaking of all
my God. Thank you for monitoring the comment, and whoever said that in the chat. Oh my God, right? I mean, I'm literally goosebumps, Lee. Like, this is the thing about the French, right? Like you try, like, and all they're saying is bump up the retirement age by 2 years, and they're like, burn it down, burn it down. They know what power means. You know what else they know, Lee? They have a historic memory and knowledge about what class unity is. They know about collective power, and they're not afraid to exercise it. Like, I look at what's happening in France and I say, why aren't we doing the same thing around the fact that we have literally health care bankruptcies? Why aren't we doing that over the fact that 20% of the American people are littering in poverty, including our children? Why aren't so you bet I'm excited about France, and I'm excited about the pockets of resistance and building alternatives that are happening in this country too.
Yeah, and we can talk more about that as well. There are pockets that are very exciting in so many ways. Some of it is worker co-op. Some of it is the strikes that have been spreading across the United States, which I think is part of the reason that the Fed is raising interest rates, because that tends to cause a recession, which tends to make people unemployed, which tends to make people take the jobs they're able to get, and they stop thinking they have the power to request or demand anything from these corporations that are destroying their lives. We can also talk about just the other day in Montana. The Montana state legislature removed some of their pro-fossil fuel wording, which because there's a trial ongoing where teens in Montana are suing the state for not providing them a clean and healthy future because of climate change. So,
Montana, the hotbed of radical environmentalism.
Right. So there are wins to speak of. I don't know if you have a few you'd like to highlight.
Well, listen, I would, and I like, so yes to, and look, here's how I think about it. Like, one of the ways to do eco-socialist revolution is from below, right? And so I'm going to name both physical locations, and I'm going to talk about what they're actually doing, right? So Jackson, Mississippi, and led by Cooperation Jackson. Humboldt County, California, led by the Wiyot tribe and the Dishgama Humboldt Community Land Trust. And Cooperation Vermont, and Atlanta, and community movement builders and the fight to stop Cop City, and Idlewild, Michigan, and the Insight Focus use of community-led digital fabrication, right? The point is, all across the country, what you're finding are examples of people who were showing, not telling, right? Not just talking about it, but actually saying, how do we meet our needs in a collective fashion to not just survive, but to thrive? And those needs are housing, food production and distribution, healthcare, art and culture. Because Lee, what we know, you know, I know, and I suspect your audience knows, is that art and culture is a human need. It's not just an add-on. The point is, when we begin to experience what it's like to collectively meet those needs outside a capitalist framework, folks will get hungry for more of it. Because here's the thing, Lee, humans, like, we are the most tested group, like, in the United States, this generation. We're the most tested humans that have ever walked on planet Earth. And by tested, I mean Wall Street and Madison Avenue. We're constantly being surveyed, examined, etc. Why? Because they're trying to figure out how to make us buy some useless crap, right? You know what the neuroscience is showing? That if you actually look at what animates, motivates, and inspires us to action, here's what we want. As my nieces have taught me to say, what we really, really want. Little Spice Girls reference.
Right. Right.
You got it. Good. So you know what we really, really want, Lee? 99% of us want connection with other people.
Yeah.
We want meaningful, productive work for which we will be respected, applauded, and appreciated. Another lie the right wing says is people are lazy, they don't want to work. Fuck you. People don't want jobs for which they will be exploited and pushed around and bossed about. What we want is meaningful, productive work. Labor is sacred, and when you offer your labor, you offer your gifts and are appreciated for it. The neuroscience shows you are a happier human being. Here's another thing the neuroscience shows. For 99% of us, if we observe another human or even another living thing in, quote, acute distress, and then we alleviate that acute distress, you know what happens to your body? You get a dopamine shot of pleasure. Like, literally, it's good for you to help other people.
It's a drug. It's a drug.
It's a drug. Hey, Lee. First one's free. I'm just saying.
I got to go get my fix of helping other people. Yeah.
Helping other people. Yeah. Lee, I'm just telling you, like, the science is clear. If you understand the hairless apes that we really are, left to our own devices, we're sort of sweet, right? The problem is, for all of that, it's the overwhelming majority, even the 99%. There's a problem with the 1%. You know, like, remember the 1%? You and I met during Occupy, right?
Yeah.
The 1% are literally sociopaths, right?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I use the word sociopaths a lot.
You do. I think I picked that up from you. Like, when I don't know if you still go by the moniker, but I still talk about you as the Occupy stand-up comedian, right?
Thank you. I'll take it. I'm proud of that.
And Lee, but the point I'm making is like, isn't it really horrible that like, so like this 1%, we have allowed them to be in charge? Like, that's kind of crazy. So like, it may not be our fault, but it is our problem, right? Like, we've got sociopaths running the institutions of our society, which includes government, but also the transnational corporations. My point is this: we can build from the bottom up a revolutionary ethos that actually meets our needs, and we starve the beast, right? And I'm not like, ultimately, we're still going to have to fight the beast, right? I'm not saying that we can ignore the fact, like, never in history have the ruling class said, oh gosh, like, you finally got together and collectivized a process and you're democratically making and implementing decisions. Here are the keys, right? We're going to have to fight them. But it's a question of whether we do a head-on frontal assault, or whether we, in other words, is it class struggle or is it class warfare, right? Now, somebody dropped in the chat something I love: no war but the class war. I'm with you. But I'd rather actually bring as many people along as possible, wean them off of the addiction to consumerism and materialism and just buying some useless crap, bring them into the solidarity economy framework, where, and the other thing is, you know what else humans want, Lee? We seem to want a fair amount of sex, right? Which I would argue that back to the connection part. But the point is, and I'm glad you got the joke, right? But the point is really, let's be playful. Let's have fun.
Listen, if your revolution is offering sex, I think it'll do well.
Well, remember, like during many of the revolutionary periods of this country, like the argument was free sex or the right for women to choose their other partners. That was actually part of the drive. So yeah, I would actually say breaking down, and I would argue transgendered rights is not exclusively, but as part of that same kind of orientation, right?
I both love speaking with you and have difficulty because you always say 32 things that I want to jump off of, and then by the time you're done speaking, I'm frozen. But one of the things I wanted to jump off of was absolutely about the need for community, and in this capitalist system, it is designed to isolate us. It's designed to atomize us. It's, we're now down to a single family unit, or sometimes just one person living per house, per seclusion box. And then on top of that, you mentioned, and it goes with it, you mentioned the fear and insecurity created by all the ads and the propagandizing, the manipulation of our endless consumer cycle. And, advertising and what it's done by corporate America, it's so little talked about. I mean, obviously it can't be talked about on mainstream media because that's who funds them. But beyond just that, it's hardly talked about even by most independent outlets. I've tried to do it somewhat, but every ad at its heart, almost every ad with a few exceptions, but almost every ad at its heart is telling you to either be to be afraid and insecure. Even if you're not cool enough or whatever, or you don't have the right tabletop, it's still a form of insecurity. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not cool enough. So it's all fear and insecurity. And then people are, again, isolated. And so they buy to try and fill that void. And like you said, at the heart of it, so much of us, what we want is community. We want to be in large groups working together. And this system has done the exact opposite.
And Lee, I love how you said it. And I got to say, I'm loving the chat. You've got you're playing to your audience, but you've also created an audience of people who understand the need for revolutionary change and transformation. And I think it's worth saying that there is a special place in hell for the current alchemists that have been like the artists and culture workers who then go to work for Madison Avenue to take the data. Oh, people want community. They want to feel connected. They want to have meaningful work for which they're appreciated. They want sex. These are the things that they want. Now let's create amazing art 30 seconds worth of inspirational narrative that will inspire either fear or terror or a desire to say, in order to feel those things that you want, you've got to buy some useless crap. Like it's like a crack cocaine addiction, right? And it's ephemeral. Like the pleasure is not even in having the thing, right?
No,
It is the moment of acquisition.
Well, yeah. Once it gets there, you got about 30 seconds till it's worn off. Yeah.
And that's why we're literally destroying the planet, trying to fill what the Zen Buddhists call the hungry ghost, right? It's a great metaphor. The hungry ghost it's a ghost, right? And it's hungry. So the hungry ghost voraciously eats and eats and consumes and consumes. But the ghost is not hungry for food because the ghost is a ghost. So no matter how much food the ghost eats, it's never sated. The appetite is always there. I would argue that's what's happening with materialism and consumerism, and frankly, the fear, right? It's not addressing what we really want and need. And I want to say this, Lee, with clarity. I do not believe human beings are angelic, nor do I believe that humans are demonic. I believe that for the overwhelming number of us, myself most certainly included, we tend to do what we're incentivized to do. And the problem is that our current capitalist, white supremacist, sexist, homophobic, settler colonial structures are all incentivizing extraction, power over, domination, and oppression. And if we created systems that incentivized love, compassion, and sharing, we would have a different world.
Yeah, and there's a great book called Civilized to Death that argues that for 100,000 years or more, humans were like that, and at our heart, we really are like that. But it takes a lot of social engineering in order to make us the way we've been behaving, which is greedy and hateful, and even just on a kind of more specific level, I was noticing when I was just in China, but also I did a trip several years ago to Cuba, and I noticed and there's other countries as well that I've been to, they seem much better at separating the people of a country from the leadership. And they may not like what American leaders, American political establishment is doing worldwide, the foreign policy, but they don't hold that against every American. And you know, there may be a country out there that's an exception, but the ones I've been to, a lot of them are like this. Whereas in the US, we are told to despise essentially every Russian, essentially every Iranian, every Chinese. And it's this horrific form of xenophobia. And people have to be like socially engineered for years to have that be the way they behave.
Oh my God. So astute observation, Lee. And I'll tell you, like, that xenophobia is actually nationalism, which is actually the one of the key component parts of fascism. And you're right. We're fed a steady stream. I've traveled internationally as you have. I have the same experience. Oftentimes, especially when I talk to other leftists, they're like, man, I feel sorry for y'all. Like y'all, like literally the global South are so much further ahead of us. And part of it, Lee, is because we've been so thoroughly propagandized and lied to that we're, you know, the chance of USA and so forth. I mean, like a lot of the leftists in the global South are sort of laughing about us, like, you know, y'all are like, I know you're not genetically defective, but you realize like the majority of you are really like behind the scene or behind the times. And Lee, you know why? Because in this country, we were fed a steady diet from our birth to our childhood, not just USA. We were taught that the United States stands for liberty, justice, and equality. And not only that, our country brings liberty, justice, and equality to the entire world. And we believe that creation myth because we want to. People want to live in liberty, justice, and equality, and we love the idea that our country spreads it. And it's not until we get older, and usually for most of us, until we get to the university level, that we begin to actually learn for the first time, oh, crap, we're not the Ewoks. We're the friggin' stormtroopers, right? Like our government, and not me, not you, but our government. Like this empire is not built for it's not an old style empire, right? yes, we benefit from it because we're here, but it's not a geographic empire of the United States. It's a corporate empire, right? And the leadership of this transnational corporate empire in this country have as much in common with the neoliberals who are running the rest of the nation states. They've got way more in common. And I guarantee you, when you were in China, the cab driver, the people who are serving you the food, you've got more in common with them on a class basis and an objective material
Right.
basis than you do with Joe Biden, right? Like straight
Yeah,
up.
all wonderful points. And I don't know if you want to use this term. I have another term I think I came up with. I haven't heard anyone else use it, but toxic nationalism. I think we should call it toxic nationalism.
I will absolutely use it. And I want to circle back to another comment you made about how effective they are. Because Lee, I want to say it depends on what side of the bed I get up on. Because sometimes I get up and I think, oh my God, there's no way that we can win, right? Like they've got billions of dollars, a steady stream of diet using television and radio and social media. And like, oh my God, there's no way that we can win. Other days I get up on the other side of the bed and I say, oh my God, there's no way that we can lose. It takes them billions of dollars every year to prop up this system. Yep. So I intentionally try to wake up and roll out on that side of the bed, right? I try to remember there's way more of us than there are of them. I try to remember that if we do the work of decolonizing, if we organize collectively at the local level where we live, work, play, and pray, where we can actually see one another, smell one another, like actually be in the human to human relationship with one another, we can win.
And I also remind myself on those days I roll off the wrong side of the bed, I also remind myself that in every revolution that ever achieved its goals, it generally seemed like they weren't going to win until they did.
Right?
It's like I don't think black people in America were 3 years before civil rights happened. We're thinking, yeah, we're real close now. I mean, it probably seemed like impossible. Or the end of slavery, or there's just so many moments that it's like it just seems impossible.
Well, I love that you said it, because I want to, you're paraphrasing a famous quote from Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it is done."
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too far into this without mentioning the summit you're a part of, the Decolonizing Economics Summit 2023, the fourth annual Post-Capitalism Conference. And maybe a good way I guess a good way to start off this is just to explain who's putting it on and what it is. But I will also, the next step will be to answer a question from a commenter who I guess is not familiar with the work that you or I do, and said, is getting beyond capitalism supposed to be a good thing? So I'll let you answer that.
So the answer is yes, because look, I'm going to actually take that head on and say, a lot of people say, oh, I support capitalism, or even better, I'm a capitalist. To which I say, oh, really? What means of production do you own? Right? Because capitalism actually has a definition, right, and it's actually quite simple. And it goes like this. The five characteristics. One, the private ownership of the means of production. Number two, that goods and services and things are produced for commodity use rather than use, right? In other words, there's use value and surplus value. Commodity production is number two. You produce things so that they can be bought and paid for at a profit, which brings us to three. Profit maximization is the only reason to do any commerce. Number four, labor itself is just one more commodity. And number five, the whole thing is done, facilitated, and allocated through markets. So market allocation. That's literally the definition of capitalism. And if you don't believe me, go to any introduction to macroeconomics textbook. Right. Go to the internet. It's literally the definition.
Right. So the capitalists are the ones who own the system.
Yes, exactly. And that's literally how they acknowledge and define it. Now they sugarcoat it, but those are the five key characteristics. Taken together, Lee, like it is horrifying because it's literally the ideology of the cancer cell. It's
Yeah.
unlimited growth on a finite planet. It is incentivizing the extraction, exploitation, oppression of the labor of human beings. And even if it generates a lot of stuff, it never distributes it fairly, equitably, or even according to need,
Yeah,
right?
it's, and that's one of the biggest arguments for capitalism is the people who say, well, capitalism is the best we've come up with for distributing materials and products and labor, fairly. And it's like, it's not distributed fairly at all. There's people who have enough resources to house 100 families as their own. And meanwhile you have 64% of Americans have said they've had trouble in the past year paying for basic needs. This isn't distributing fairly.
Right, and the idea, by the way, that we're rewarding people for work or incentive, it's like it's bullshit, right? It's just not true. I mean, and frankly, like I come out of poverty. And I want to be clear, I'm not poor anymore. I'm solidly in the middle class, but I come out of poverty. And so it's always like my hatred of capitalism is not merely intellectual. I can break down Das Kapital. I can talk about it with anybody, but my hatred of capitalism is lived experience. It's earned, right? I know what it's like to carry a 5-gallon bucket of my family's excrement at the end of the day as a chore as an 8-year-old boy, right? Now, I had to learn hatred of white supremacy and heteropatriarchy and settler colonialism, right? And I hate them too, but that's intellectual, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I know is this, Lee, all of us descend from indigenous people. I'm going to say that again. Every human being descends from indigenous ancestors who were in right relationship with land and were in reciprocal relationship, nurturing the land and the water, nurturing our relatives, our cousin the salmon, our cousin the trees. Like there was a reciprocal responsibility and rights with and to each other. That's to answer the question, what is decolonizing economics? To move away from capitalism and not just to eco-socialism, although that's what I'm for, but to push myself even more to say, I want to decolonize my own mind. I want to decolonize the systems and structures, and I want to get back to the life that is my birthright. I'm supposed to be in right relationship with other humans. I'm supposed to be in right relationship with Mother Earth and Father Sky. Like my ancestors in Scotland and Ireland were actually properly stewarding land, right?
So maybe you're doing it now. Define right relationship.
So right relationship is not just about the humans or one tribe going to war against all the rest of nature just for your own tribe, but to see that we are in an interconnected web of relationship. And anywhere a true where people are still indigenous, you find the highest rates of biodiversity. Let's say it again. Everywhere that indigenous people are still allowed to be indigenous, we witness objectively the highest levels of biodiversity. We see the highest amount of life because it is a reciprocal relationship. And I know I descend from people who are now called Scottish and people who are now called Irish, right? And my people who were stewarding that land properly were in right relationship with land and with other life, were pushed off of their land by the English Empire, utterly traumatized, came to this land, this continent, the United States, and traumatized the indigenous people here, pushed them off the land, right? Mm-hmm. So there is no shortage of trauma. I'm literally a descendant of traumatized and traumatizer, right? What I'm saying is, let's acknowledge the history of the United States and then say that past does not have to be our future. I work for the Wiyot tribe. I'm not an enrollee of the Wiyot tribe. I'm an employee of the Wiyot tribe. Never had a Wiyot person tell me, leave. What I've had them say is, you need to be here differently. And we can teach you how to be here. So I'm a guest on Wiyot territory. And Lee,
I was going to ask you how you came to your understanding of the indigenous thought, and it sounds like they sat you down and said you need to be here differently.
That's exactly right. And literally, I've had multiple people say, David, you're a good person. We see you're a good human, and you're not doing it right. you know, and so, and again, I'll refer back to you, right? Toxic nationalism is not doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There's a way to be human. So the Decolonizing Economic Summit, and folks, if any of this is making sense to you, please register. It's totally free, April 20 through 22. And I trust, Lee, that you're going to put the decolonizingeconomicsummit.org embedded in all of the stuff that you do.
I will. I'll throw it in the comment thread right now. But I imagine if people Google what's on the screen right there, Decolonizing Economics Summit, they'll probably find it pretty quickly.
You'll find it right away. The point is this: we are literally going to start off with an opening and a welcome from the Wiyot people, because we are the Cal Poly Humboldt is on Wiyot ancestral territory. But then the very first session is, what is decolonization, right? Like, it's literally a deep dive into what we mean by that. Then we'll have sessions on the role of the people's media in decolonizing. We'll have people from Indian Country Today, Native American Views, Shareable, Nonprofit Quarterly. If I was a better organizer, Lee, I would have reached out to you and had you on that panel. So next year. But the point is decolonization and the law, public banking, participatory budgeting, worker-owned cooperatives, the universal basic income, very concrete ways that what we call non-reformist reforms, right? What are things that we can win right now that are already happening that are not just reforms? They're reforms, yes, they make people's lives better within the existing system, but they're intentionally designed to subvert the entire system. I am now still a revolutionary, even as I work on things within the system. And that's, I think, what this summit is about. How can we push ourselves to be serious revolutionaries within the current system?
And to go back to what you were saying about the indigenous and working, being stewards of the land, a good example would be, like a drastic example, would be what's gone on in the past few years in Brazil. You have indigenous, many uncontacted tribes that have lived in concert with the land and the forests and the jungles and the Amazon for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then you have a momentary, Bolsonaro was in office for 4 years. In that time, you have people burning just miles and miles and miles of Amazon, what some have called the lungs of the planet, to profit quickly from the ability to, chop down the wood, sell it, and use the land for grazing or what have you. So it's a momentary profit that at most would last a couple of years for a forest, a jungle that has benefited this earth for thousands of years. And many say, give these areas back to indigenous that know how to live with them in concert with the land. And, I kind of just wanted to give a really drastic example of that, but yeah.
No, well, thank you for giving that example. And thank you so much for making it Brazil, because number one, let's acknowledge Bolsonaro is a fascist, right? Yep. And we were watching fascists and some liberal version fight it out in the electoral front. But I'm also glad that you brought up Brazil as a specific example and talked about the Amazon that has functioned as the lungs of the planet since time immemorial. Yes, that's true. And here's something else. Do you know that the best cutting edge research is showing that especially the southern rim of the Amazon, but all throughout the Amazon, it was actually densely populated by humans who were living in right relationship. So it was densely populated. There were between 500,000 and 1 million people living just within the Amazon. So it was densely populated, but they were living in balance. So not only densely populated with humans, but also with trees and monkeys. And like, it was just incredibly rich. It was incredibly fecund. It was, again, not designed just for how to extract and commodify the natural world, but how to nurture and be in reciprocal relationship with the natural world. These are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I would argue we could literally indigenize, and with our new technology, if we actually democratized technology and decolonized our minds and decolonized space, like we could be living, let me get this right. I think that how the kids have taught me to say it. Luxury, fully automated luxury gay space communism. That's literally the world that we could be living in right now.
I like it. Let's break down, and I know this is going to be the one of the first panels is at the summit, is what is meant by decolonization. When you say decolonization of your mind, can you talk a little about what exactly that means? I can see that having very important ramifications of the way we behave. And I could also see that phrase being thrown around by people trying to mock it and saying, they're talking about decolonizing their minds. Like, so.
Well, yeah, sure, fair enough. And look, I've told you before, I literally do go into pool halls and bowling alleys and have these conversations.
I'm just excited you found a bowling alley that's still open.
Well, look, I mean, look at how I'm dressed. Somebody else talked about my my wardrobe choices. I think I had a Canuck. I live in Humboldt County, and there is still a bowling alley. But the point is, Lee, I can have these conversations, but I don't say decolonizing your mind to them. I don't talk about a liberatory framework. No. I say things like, "Don't you think the boss man got his boot on our neck? You think this shit is fair?" Like I can have,
which is very much part of getting there. Yeah,
right.
Figuring out that he's got a boot on your neck.
Yeah, exactly. And the point I'm making is, so like I always try. Thank you, Holly, for registering. Who just said that they just registered. Thank you, Holly. And hey, be like the cool kids. Be like Holly. Holly. They're a cool kid. They registered.
Holly's one of the best. She's at a lot of my live streams. She's awesome.
Oh, right on, Holly. Well, say howdy whenever whenever you do come. So Lee, decolonizing our minds is about challenging the assumptions that we're steeped in, right? Challenging the assumption that happiness will be brought to you by things and the accumulation of things. Decolonizing our minds means really confronting the reality of white supremacy and heteropatriarchy. And I'm going to be very clear and candid and vulnerable when I say, as a white person, I know I'm bathed and steeped in privilege because of my pigment. And you know what else? I'm harmed by white supremacy as well. I'm because I have a penis and I'm white or I'm male presenting, right? And I'm cisgendered. I am bathed and steeped in privilege. And I am harmed by patriarchy as well. What do I mean by that? I mean, it comes at a profound cost. The cost of white supremacy for people with my pigment is my humanity. It stripped me from understanding and knowing my Scottish and Irish heritage and culture, and replaced it with Super Bowl and football and, beer. Right? Like it's an incredibly toxic environment. Yes, it's given me all sorts of privileges, but it's come at a very high cost. My male privilege comes at an incredibly high, like, of course, women are way more abused by patriarchy than our men. I'm not denying that. I'm saying it also hurts me because my ability to access my emotions properly, the feminine sacred that I hold within me biologically, that was never allowed to be nurtured or expressed, that cost me, right? So decolonizing my mind means to come to terms with the fact that I can be both simultaneously incredibly privileged and oppressed at the same fucking moment, right? And that it doesn't have to be this way. So the idea of coming to stepping in to the birthright of being a fully functional person, a human who's living in right relation with other humans and with the natural world, it's going to take some work. I've got to decolonize myself from the white supremacist culture and the toxic nationalism and that like all the crap, right? And get back to what is my birthright. I'll say it again. Like, we're supposed to be living differently.
Well said. And yeah, I like your point about how those of us with the privilege of being white male or just white or what have you, we also are heavily impacted by it. And I love the line, even though it's a bit vulgar, but I hope people can handle it. It's a line from a Brother Ali song called Uncle Sam Goddamn, which is, if anyone's never listened to that song, it's amazing. It's a rap song, but it goes through the history of America and everything. And one of the lines is the overseers also got raped along the way. And he's talking about plantations and slavery. And he's saying the generations that descended from the overseers lost their soul. The next line is something about you lose your soul when you destroy the humanity and dignity of other humans. And it's true. There is an impact to this privilege and to a system that works this way and works in exploitation and harm and hatred. And so I'm glad you brought that point up. I wanted to get to the next thing it says the summit will cover, which is media and decolonization. And it talks about how media informs the scope of what is realistic and possible. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, I think that we touched on that earlier, right?
Yeah.
And we already see that that's happening, right? The role of the media in the United States anywhere is not the typical type of like heavy-handed censorship, like you must think this thing. This is what you're allowed to think about, right? You see the subtle difference, right? These are the things that are important. This is what's possible. And then they ridicule and mock those of us who say, no, it can be more, or it can be more. And again, Lee, look, I'm not being sycophantic. I'm not trying to blow sunshine up your ass, but like, there's a reason that they targeted you, because you had the audacity to not only offer scathing indictment and critique, but you were funny. Right? Like, oh no, we cannot have that dude. Like, people cannot know who he is because he'll both get them laughing and then get them thinking and then get them asking, wait a minute. Like, again, there's a reason that, again, it's not like, they haven't locked you up, but what they've done is make it very hard for you to get an audience. And notwithstanding, you like an audience is finding you, right? But I'm just saying, if we're going to if we actually decolonize the media, we would actually not just deconstruct the corporate media landscape. We would actually say, okay, how do we use media to deliver message for liberation? How do we use media to have the kind of conversations about what world do we want and how do we get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And it is kind of like, I'm not surprised to be targeted. I know that in media, you say the things that I say or you said when running for president, and you are attacked and maligned and all of those things. So I'm not surprised to be targeted, but it was interesting to look at the people that were not nearly as targeted and go, well, what's the difference between me and them? Well, often it was, they may be critical of the system, but they're not getting to the core criticisms. They're not saying the word capitalism. They're not really getting deep into a lot of these things. And I think that is far less threatening to the system. But anyway, I wanted to jump down in the schedule of the summit to something that I always think is so important, and I'd love to hear you talk about it, because I always walk away from conversations with you feeling rejuvenated. And one of the topics is rejuvenation from activist fatigue, which I have seen so many amazing activists, people that I was so impressed with, that I looked up to, and it's usually that they fizzle away. It's less often that they have a change of heart and run for the hills. It's more often that you just stop hearing much from them. And in a way, I understand. It's like to fight against a system that is all around you every day is fucking exhausting.
It is exhausting. And, I'm reminded of one of my favorite Banksy creations, right? Banksy's got some great stuff.
Yep.
But one of them is a little girl crouching down and there's a bird, right? Right. And it's really sweet. And you see like a bit of joy on her face, but there's also something very pensive about it, right? And here's the caption, Lee. When you get tired, learn to rest, not quit. And I think that this is the thing, like you know me, I'm fueled by righteous anger, right? I am so pissed about the current racist, sexist, class oppressive society. But what I also know is I can't stay mired in anger because that's that like this. And again, the neuroscience shows that's actually damaging to me. But if I get involved in efforts to address the systemic injustices and I work with people for a better world, that becomes like a kind of alchemy. It's a way to get towards joy, right? There you go. If you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit. And so there's two things. Number one, allow your anger to provoke you to action for justice and tap into the joy of working together for that framework. And the second thing, have more fun, be more playful, tell more jokes, have more sex, play more games, right? Like, and I'll tell you, look, I'm not embarrassed to tell you, it doesn't normally come up. About 9 years ago, I had a sacred mystical experience with ayahuasca, and I could do a whole Spalding Gray level monologue on it. But to cut to the chase, here's what, after purging and like ego dissolution, ayahuasca beat me down and then answered the question that I had asked. How can I be a more effective revolutionary? It goes like this. Okay, David, now that we put you through hours and hours of mental and spiritual torture to get you able to hear it, here's the answer. Lighten up. You're doing the right thing, but stop taking yourself so seriously. Yes, it's important what you're doing. Oh, but here's another thing ayahuasca said. Yeah, like this world is in jeopardy and you need to work hard for it, but don't sweat it. There are other worlds, other dimensions. There's so much more than your little feeble mind can actually understand. So absolutely do the work, but stop taking yourself so seriously. Relax a little bit. So I've been following the spiritual advice.
Yeah. To take it out of the realm of other worlds, one thing I think about to just calm my mind and feel less important, which and I mean that in kind of a positive sense of like you're just saying, like in order to not feel crushed by this this window of time to create great change. Is to think about like deep time, to think about the civilizations, you know, that you watch shows or documentaries on these civilizations that you've never heard of that lasted 1,000 years in, you know, the Pacific Islands or something. And it's like we are a speck of a moment on this tiny little speck of dust. And at times it's good to think about that, you know, to feel both important and unimportant at the same time.
Listen, and I'm going to have to jump, Lee. It's like this 55 minutes just flew by.
Yes.
You know, I love talking to you. I love what you're doing. I love your audience and this rich comment. Folks, decolonizingeconomicsummit.org. Please sign up and come. And remember that Lee always ends, or at least he used to, with the keep fighting, right? Yes, we have to keep fighting, but we also have to keep building, right? So keep fighting the old, keep building the new, love each other, take care of each other, and we can win.
Absolutely, David. Thank you so much. I know you got a heart out. Great talking to you, and hope to talk to you again soon.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you, folks, so much for joining us. Sorry, I had forgot. I knew he needed to be done in an hour, but I forgot he had to go at 55 minutes. So, but I can't recommend, you know, more what he does, and I'm sure this summit is going to be amazing. I might try to attend myself if I can get those times free, but yeah, so at least check it out. It's not like I work for them or anything, but at least take a look and see what you think of it. Thank you so much for joining me, folks. I have these interviews twice a week. I just spoke to Ajamu Baraka, the former vice presidential candidate for the Green Party, as well as this interview with David Cobb. If you got here late, you can go watch this whole thing soon at youtube.com/behindtheheadlines. I also recently spoke to Professor Mahoney in China, who a lot of people said that was an incredible talk, and they wished we could talk for more than an hour. So I think you're going to get out a lot out of that one as well. Yeah, go back and enjoy some of these interviews when you have time. It's youtube.com/behindtheheadlines. There's also a new episode of the most censored news. I'll actually put the link in the comment thread here so that you can go watch that. Here it is. And yeah, new episode on the water wars and who's buying up all of the fresh water in the United States. So I hope you'll enjoy that and share that and everything. And thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to have you join me for these talks, and keep fighting.